This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning, everyone. This is the November meeting of the Whatcom County Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force. We'll start with our land acknowledgement statement. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. I'm glad to call this meeting to order. Welcome you all. This is an important meeting. I will just briefly remind everyone that for quite a long time, the task force was of the opinion that we were not adequately and fully communicating our work and our accomplishments to the broader community, and that understanding left a hole in the ability of the community to work through some important issues. We also felt that we did not have channels for taking in community input to inform our work. And so we set about through the support of the county council to contract for communications assistance. And I can't tell you how pleased the steering committee has been with the ability we've had in the last, I don't even know how long, to work with Pyramid Communications and Emily and Temple Water Consulting with Sakara to work through some communications packages that I think have made significant steps in connecting us in a two-directional way with the community on our work. And the other part of that contract, which we felt was important, comes to fruition today. We wanted to understand for ourselves how better to frame communications going forward on our own. And so Emily and Sakara are here to provide a kind of training for us to start out being able to be our own communications consultants to a certain extent, not to the degree and the quality that they've provided us, but to carry that forward a little bit as well as we can. So today is the training. That's our primary agenda, and I'll turn it over to Sakara and Emily.
Thank you, Stephen. Good morning, everyone. My name is Emily. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm Pyramid's COO. It has been such an honor to work with you all for the last couple of years, and it's good to see some names and faces that we have worked with in the last couple of years, and some new names and faces. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And can folks see this presentation?
Yep.
Yes, great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so as Stephen said, today we are going to be moving through a training with you all. We will cover communications broadly, but spend the majority of our time focused on training around messaging specifically, and the work that you all will continue moving forward to develop content that is keeping the public abreast of your work. So our goal for today is to support you all in moving forward, developing and utilizing messaging that will support engagement between the task force and Whatcom County residents. Our goals in doing this are to increase awareness and understanding of Whatcom County's commitment to transforming its criminal, legal, and behavioral health systems, to increase awareness and understanding of success, but also challenges along the way, and what all goes into this work, and to help build public wealth for the path forward. Through the training, we will hope that you all will have an understanding of the work that has been done so far. We'll do a little bit of practice and a bit of a workshop around new message development, and discuss needs and opportunities to continue to grow your audiences and increase impact with communications moving forward. So in terms of topics, we're going to spend just a little bit of time at the beginning here, touching base on some of our accomplishments to date. We'll move pretty quickly through that. And I believe there was a packet in your pre-materials that included an impact report that goes into more detail about our work to date. We will talk a bit about 2024 goal and priority setting for communications. Spend the majority of our time workshopping how we go about creating new messaging moving forward. We'll do some question and answer time, and then talk a little bit about some items related to needs assessment and recommendations for you all moving forward based on our experience working with you all to date. So I'll stop there. Any questions about the purpose of the day or what we'll cover before we move forward? Great. Awesome. Okay, so we'll start by just touching base on some of our accomplishments to date. Our original goals in setting out on this work together were 4. First, to raise public awareness of Whatcom County's work to transform its criminal, legal, and behavioral health systems. To deepen understanding of what a criminal, legal, and behavioral health system grounded in community care looks like, which is essentially to say, to help people really understand the vision and the why behind your work, to deepen public will through better understanding for the work moving forward, and to really show how community is centered and involved in transforming the criminal legal systems. And so a lot of our communications were about inviting people into this work and making sure the points of access into it were clear. We do think that we saw some important success in our first couple of years together, sheerly from a numbers perspective. Over the course of our collaboration in 2022 and 2023, the task force's social media and paid advertising content was seen more than 1 million times. We secured 2 op-eds on behalf of the task force that reached an additional 5.9 million readers in print, online, and mobile. And total clicks, primarily through that digital advertising, were more than 5,000 to visit the task force's webpage to learn more about your work. And Sakara is going to break those results down in a little bit more detail here before we move forward into the remaining message training.
Great. Everybody can hear me okay? Emily, can you give me a thumbs up?
Yes.
Okay, great. Next slide. So we started this work, and just to put this in a little bit more context, Emily mentioned that you have the impact report, gives you all the numbers and all of that. But for this training, we're going to be talking about these things in a little bit more context of the how and what we did to get these messages out. So in terms of our first kind of big launch for messaging for the IPRTF, that came in the form of message testing. And that the platform and channels that we used for that was Facebook, starting a Facebook page, and then putting out some A/B message testing to see what brought the most folks in. And so we know how many people we reached in Whatcom County, because that was a very targeted effort. We know how many times those people collectively saw the information that we were putting out, which is important that people see things multiple times. That's just the human process of learning and retaining information and starting to pay attention to things that typically aren't in your social media orbit. And the outcome, one of the big outcomes of that, was helping us to drill down on some overarching messaging and a tagline for our IPRTF, which is what we are so used to saying now, transforming criminal, legal, and behavioral health systems in Whatcom County. Next slide. The next example that we look at is town hall promotion. We had ads pretty much everywhere we could put them: Facebook, Instagram, Bellingham Herald newsletter and website, and Cascadia Daily News newspaper and daily newsletter. So you were going into people's emails, people were you in physical print in newspapers that they picked up, they were seeing you in digital ads in newspapers that they read online, and they were seeing on social media as well. And of course, you can see the numbers there. Next slide. Throughout this process, we also ran just some general awareness and education ads where we kind of delved into and gave a little bit more meatier content to get people grounded in who the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force is, why such an entity exists, your vision and purpose of your work. And you can see the numbers there. Next slide. We've talked a lot about paid efforts, but it's important to understand the impact that you can have if you don't have a budget for paid advertising, that it is still with might think is a really small number of followers can have a huge impactful reach in your community. So through having 564 followers, your message is still permeating out much farther than that, directly in your Whatcom County community. And you can see a little bit of information about what people, the information that you put online when we are putting posts on social media, and we include links and the like, people to where you are directing them to click through, in the case, the IPRTF web pages. And then you learn a little bit about your audience, who it is that you are reaching and where in Whatcom County you're reaching them. Next slide. Oh, we freeze. Next slide, Emily, the newspaper op-ed.
Can folks,
There we go.
can folks see that? I wonder if there's
Yes.
a little delay.
I got it now.
Okay, great.
Might have been a little delay, but I got it now. Yes. So we focused a lot on social media, but this is another pivotal example of some successful applications of the IPRTF. You had 2 op-eds in different publications, both kind of conveying the same message, but emphasizing different points based on your audience. This reaches a huge audience in and outside Whatcom County, but we didn't just rely on placing an op-ed and hope people see it. This is an example of what we would call cross-channel promotion. So we promoted these on social media to make sure that people that follow you on social media knew that you had an op-ed. We crafted an email that had some timely updates at the time that these op-eds came out, shared the links there as well to drive people who are interested in the work that you're doing directly to the op-ed. And then the crafting of this op-ed is an example where kind of your mission, your vision, your goals and priorities for communications all came together. You're able to articulate kind of the why, the what, the how, the vision, and the heart of improving the Whatcom County community. Next slide. So what are some key takeaways that we learned from those particular efforts? I shared some of this, I believe, with your steering committee. Can you still hear me okay? I'm getting a signal that getting it. Okay. So I shared some of this with your steering committee, I believe, last week, but it's important to understand that you've had absolutely tremendous success with your communications efforts, and there is an appetite. You have a natural audience that wants to know about what we're doing and the changes that are happening in Whatcom County. And it's a very niche topic, but it's a very timely topic. It's something that cuts to the heart of people's value and the things that they care about the most, which is the community that they live in, where they raise their children, where they put business dollars, and so forth. So you were able to quickly grow and engage an audience on your Facebook page. And we would expect that even if you're not doing a paid push behind continued audience growth, will continue to see audience growth. You will continue to see interest. I'm a firm believer of if you build it, they will come. You just have to continue to maintain it and grow it appropriately. And the second takeaway is, as you all know, and the reason why we are even here with you today and have done this work with you, it's a lot. A lot of information. It's a lot to bring people to the table and cultivate a shared understanding around incarceration prevention and reduction. And, you know, what it is, why it matters, and dispelling misleading information as well. The comment section on IPRTF, we'll talk about when we get into recommendations, shows that many people are operating from differences of understanding around this vast and important topic. And something that your executive said in your steering committee meeting that I will paraphrase, that we are believers in, and I think your leadership of your task force has also been believers in, is that most people in community want solutions. Most people in community do want to get to the same table and take the next step, even if it's a difficult challenge step. They want to do it together. They want to understand. They want to be a partner with their local government. And when they have accurate information, accurate and timely information, it strengthens their confidence in taking those next steps forward. And so it's just continuing, knowing that you just have to continue to chip away at it, and that when you come up against misunderstanding about what is happening, that is nothing but an opportunity to delve into developing communications to clarify and bring new and accurate information to people. Emily, anything you want to add?
No, I think that's great. Thank you.
Okay. I'm just going to really quickly and see if there are any initial questions, thoughts from that first section before we into probably our meatiest topic of the day, which is creating new messages. Arlene, I think you're talking.
Yeah.
There you go. Yes, you were muted, but I think we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay. You don't even realize that you're using jargon, and people don't like to read jargon. They are turned off by it. And so you have to make yourself conscious of it's important that you communicated, but you communicated in a way that is typical to that profession, even politics. So I think it's important to go through the future communications and turn the words into simple words so that they will be better understood.
That's a great point. Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, Sakara, thanks so far for the presentation. And some of this we got to see in steering, but this is always great to see it again. I had a question about some of the data, and you had some great data about how many people respond and how many people click. Do the methods that you all use or do the methods that we'll be able to employ, do they show us any demographic breakdown? Do we get to see how different people, maybe based on their identities, are responding one way or another to message testing? Or is that just a level that we just don't get to?
It's a level that we don't get to if we're not doing something like focus groups. Social media used to darn near tell me how many times you wore a yellow shirt in a year. But that was prior to and the reason why that has gone away is because unfortunately a lot of entities use that to target people for disinformation. So we used to get a lot of demographic information about exactly who, what, where, why, and they've really kind of risen to a much kind of higher level of this is the gender if they've identified it, this is the zip code, this may be some common things that they're interested in, and this is what they did or didn't do with the information that you gave them. But outside of something like message testing, you're not going to get that through these channels, unfortunately.
Sure. So message testing, I guess, allows you to see, differing reactions based on people identities. You mentioned focus groups. Can you think of any others you might leave with us as possible avenues to figure out?
I'm going to ask Emily to weigh in on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think digital surveys could be really helpful as well, because then you can fill in the demographic info that you're inviting folks to self-identify with. So digital surveys can be really helpful. As Sakara said, with the paid digital stuff and social, we're really only able to see geography and male or female identifying today. But I think focus groups would be a great methodology, because then you can also really kind of understand not only who people are and what their backgrounds are, but dig deeper. So if we say we like something or don't like something, or agree with something or don't agree with something, we can talk more about why. And then surveys offer you less of an opportunity to kind of dig into how people are feeling or what people are thinking, but are a great tool to provide a forum where folks are self-identifying some of that demographic information.
Sure. All right, great. Thank you both so much.
Mm-hmm. All right. So how is the sausage made going forward? Let's talk about it. The wonderful thing is that you have a tremendous amount of resources and steps that we have helped you kind of get used to. Not everybody is in those meetings, so we're going to talk about kind of what some of those pre-steps are before you're putting pen to paper to come up with a message. What are those kind of things that you will be doing annually? And so we talked very briefly at the very beginning of what our original kind of mandate was, what our agreed upon goals were for our work. And so when you're talking about what are we going to be communicating about in the future, you're really starting with a conversation, and it doesn't need to happen in its entirety here. It can happen in one of your other meetings, but a conversation about, okay, what are our communications goals? Revisiting them. You have the original goals here. And so it's having a conversation about, are these still our goals? Are we adjusting them, adding to them, taking away from them? if some of you have thoughts, I would suggest that you jot them down and take notes for that coming conversation. But it leads directly into the next slide where we will have a little bit of conversation, which is you're outlining what your goals are, and then you're looking at what's the plan and the calendar for the year. What topics do you plan to communicate? When are you communicating about a given topic? And on what platforms or channels will you use to get the message out? And so, are there any immediate thoughts from anybody in the room about not necessarily when or what channels, but what topics feel important in the coming year to dig into for community that would help give community more context and understanding about the work happening to transform the criminal, legal, and behavioral health care systems in Whatcom County? Now, I don't know if I'm going to butcher your name, so you're going to have to correct me. Is it Melissa?
That's fine. Maya Lisa.
Maya Lisa.
Thanks.
Maya. Okay.
Yeah, I just think I know that this entity has put a lot of energy into educating about and contributing to the formation of a plan for the new jail, which now we have the funding approved for. I think maintaining a flow of education to the public and information to the public about how that's developing, because accountability was a really huge concern for a large part of our community about how that was going to be done. And I want to see that flow of communication continue at the same rate that it did pre-election, so that we can continue to have the faith of the community and that we're building something that reflects the community's desires. Also, always say like public defense.
Can you say a little bit more about public defense?
Yeah.
What in particular do you think is important there?
Funding, support, looking at, there's a lot of different approaches that we could work on developing in our community, more holistic approach. And right now there's a shortage of attorneys and a shortage of public defenders. And, we're contending with that, and that affects the incarceration rates.
So is it kind of like a state of public defense in like post COVID?
Yeah, I think it's something that that affects the community and is an unfolding kind of crisis, actually. So.
Thank you. Raylene.
Thank you. I'd like to echo some of the concerns that Maya just brought up on public defense. I think a lot of individuals don't understand the requirements for public defense and what they have to meet for the standards set by the Supreme Court, and those are changing. And so making sure that we educate the people, the general public, on what the needs are, and that there is a shortage, and people should not be incarcerated and be unrepresented, and that we need to solve those things. I'm sure Maya and I will be working on that in the future closely together to try to work through some of that as I've obtained a new role. So more to follow under that. But as we're talking about topics that we need to communicate about, what comes to me right now is the changing of the guards. We've got a lot of people that are going to be terming out at the end of this year. We have a lot of new people, and the need for people that want to commit themselves to the task force and to the committees that are willing to step up into some of those roles. I think that's probably an important thing to get out there, to communicate that there is a need for that. I think that's all I have right now, but thank you.
Thank you. Mike.
No, I've already spoken, so thanks for choosing me a second time. I think my thought about future messages, it goes back to Sakara and Emily, some of the stats you were showing about how when you bring people in, there's increased interest. There's a responsibility, though, to keep in contact with those folks. And I would say, too, that the task force, but the county in general, did a good job with the On Deacon Center for Hope and inviting in the community and trying to take that input and help shape some of these interventions. And as Maya Lisa mentioned, now that our community has passed funds for jail and behavioral health facilities, now comes the work of putting that into play. And I think it's important to, whatever goodwill we have built and whatever we can continue to build, is to invite people in ways, shapes, and forms that they're comfortable with, to get that feedback, to help them shape what the system looks like. I think we're really open to, but we also really need that feedback. And I would argue, just from a racial equity standpoint, it's really important to know, too, how different groups may have certain needs or certain perspectives that could be really valuable, and not to assume that because we got 5 clicks, that means that's good. Who gave us the click? What did they need? What were they missing? So I would just like us to use some of this new way that we're reaching out, the new way that we're bringing people in, to go further with that as we go down our road.
Rebecca.
Yeah, sorry, from the car. I just wanted to echo Maya Lisa's comments. Public trust is everything. And we're in a position now where there's folks that voted yes that just want to see what we're going to do, because for the longest time, I think there was no votes just because of a lack of trust. So I think it's super critical for us to demonstrate we're doing what we said we were going to do.
Thank you. Daniel?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for recognizing me. I've got my video off because my Wi-Fi is pretty shaky right now. So I'd echo what everybody just said about the jail, about the public defender situation. It's complicated. I think that needs to really get out there to folks. I'd also like to add into the equation that we need to be discussing how the alternate response team is incorporated into our discussions as it relates to people experiencing behavioral health crisis. The 23-hour behavioral health relief center that Mike Parker referenced also should be in the conversation moving forward. And I've talked to a lot of voters in the past few months. I was running for re-election, and talking on voters' doorsteps. Public safety, perceived and real, is out there when it comes to the downtown in particular, but also the north end of town in Cordata. And so I think that we should be discussing how we're going to be addressing, in particular, the fentanyl opiate crisis.
Thank you. Maya, your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to circle back and suggest that there should be a focus as well on prosecutorial diversion programs and whatever is being developed, what needs to be developed, where we're getting funding, and like a close tracking of like how those programs are going. LEAD isn't really used as a diversion program, but how can it be? And those discussions are happening. And thank you, because that has to do with like this stream of cases coming into our system and folks that could be diverted to other programming.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Heather.
Good morning. I have my screen off because I just am walking my daughter to school, but listening. And thank you for the question and the presentation. One thing that caught my ear was our tagline about transforming the criminal, legal, and behavioral health in our community. It'd be really great, I think, as a task force to have a discussion about that specifically and make sure that we all understand and share a definition about what does that mean. And is it incremental? Is it, huge sweeps of change at once? And really explaining that well to the community. And the second thing I'd add is I think we should be communicating what is different because of the task force. what is a result of our work together, and um, kind of help the community understand what the point is of this. And also the oh gosh, what was I going to say? Sorry, hold on. Oh, some of the basic data, I think that hopefully we can get a better understanding of, that we can share in simple ways about who is in jail and why, and what is the transformation that we're working on as a county and or as a task force to help those people and ultimately achieve better safety. So, but I think having a conversation as a task force and maybe, you know, a good debate about what do we mean together by transforming would be actually a really productive conversation. And what are the goals that we actually share in that?
Jason.
Yeah, sorry if I had to step out for a call, but so I'm not sure what Maya Lisa was saying, and I apologize if I'm repeating something. But I know Heather just mentioned something I wanted to say as well. But I hope that we can really touch on the racial disparities in this community when it comes to incarceration, and how this task force can help bridge that gap with communicating. Sorry, I'm getting over a flu, y'all, so if you can't really understand me, my bad. But that's so huge. The racial disparities, like there's a lot of fearful BIPOC community members that y'all don't know, that I know, with this new vote that just came in, that, you know, we're afraid. You know, there's a lot of fear now. And whether y'all want to take that serious or not, that's, you know, we have a new chief now, sheriff, who's Black. And, you know, I hope that we can all rally around him and his team, and to making sure that, you know, when we really talk about the incarceration system, that we're communicating in a way that is like closing that gap, those racial disparities within this community. Because again, there's a lot of fear now, whether y'all want to acknowledge that or not, it's real. And I hope that y'all take that serious. We take that serious as a task force, and ensuring that our communication is bridging a gap that centers love and transformative change. And what Heather just said, like, let's really define, what does that actually mean? That will go a long way with a lot of Black and brown people who you all don't know, that I know in this community, that don't speak up, that are just in poverty. And, you know, we just got to do better. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your input. We've taken detailed notes. Okay, next slide. So, as was mentioned, sounds like there's going to be a great deal of over in the IPRTF and in leadership. And so just sort of orienting folks to the fact that one of the things that was created in our work, in partnership with you all and your wonderful staff, is understanding that there is a team, that there are supporters of your comms, and then there's a process to actually getting it done. And so as you're having these very important kind of level setting, grounding conversations and discovery with each other going forward, you're going to want to very clearly define, okay, the team going forward that is central to working on communications is X group. And then the other piece that's really important to that is that you're communicating about things that touch or impact other departments, other agencies, sometimes outside partners. And it's important to bring them in before you're publishing communications so that they can give input and feedback on the content as well. There's also your legal department often looks at, the county's legal department often looks at messaging and communications before it goes out as well. And then there's the publishing process. So typically it goes, core communications group drafts your communications, and then you kind of revise it. You have discussion amongst your core group, you revise it, you bring in other supporters or stakeholders in the work to get their feedback and input for accuracy. Do another revision of it, send it off to legal if necessary, come back again, make sure everybody is good with it, and then move forward to publishing. I'm going to pause there, Jill, just to make sure that that was accurate, or if there's anything else that you want to add on process.
No, that was very accurate. Thank you, Sakara.
Okay, great. Next slide, please. So when you are getting into actually creating new messaging, it's important to understand that you're not reinventing the wheel completely. These are things that you already have that we've worked with you to develop. You have core best practices to guide your messaging. You have that overarching messaging of what it is that the IPRTF does. You have a messaging framework, which we'll talk about. You have brandings and templates, and you have various channels for publishing your messaging. Next slide. So these are the core best practices for all communications, but the one that we've really drilled down into with this work with the IPRTF, which is communicate with clarity, consistency, and as much simplicity as possible. Jargon sometimes cannot be avoided. It's making sure that you're breaking it down in the simplest terms with the simplest words as possible. And understand that messaging is like parenting or being a teacher or any other kind of thing. You have to repeat yourself constantly before a message starts to take hold. And sometimes people lean into different parts of a message. And so you just have to be consistent. It's absolutely okay to say, oh yes, we're going to rerun this messaging again. Every year we rerun this core messaging. We update or fine tune messaging about the IPRTF, who we are, what we're doing, why we're doing things like that. What is the Justice Project? It's okay to repeat your messaging. And then always offering an opportunity to engage with every communication. So provide feedback, share the work, take more direct action, send us an email, show up to a meeting, et cetera, et cetera. And then pointing back to the why, the vision, reminding audiences why changes are being made in Whatcom County, helps the IPRTF build that values-based connection and deepen support with community. Next slide. So you'll continue to have conversation about this, transforming the criminal, legal, and behavioral health systems in Whatcom County. That is the existing overarching messaging of the IPRTF. Next slide. We'll talk about this more in a few minutes, but this is the messaging framework for the IPRTF. And there is, you can go back to virtually any messaging that has been published by the IPRTF, and it can be broken down into these segments. These are things that are consistently showing up in your messaging. The what, the why, more details and proof and background points, and then an action piece for your audience. And again, we'll dive deeper shortly. Next slide. So when developing new messaging, it's really important to start with very basic questions. And we have an A example and a B example for you here that we're going to run through. So the very basic questions is, what is being communicated and why? Upcoming town hall for Whatcom County residents needs to be advertised so people know about it. Just your basics of what you're doing. And then your second basic question for developing a new message is, what is the desired outcome? So an example is, we want to increase awareness of why the town hall is happening, the core issues that will be discussed. And we want to get people to the event, get feedback from the public on the core issue, even if perhaps they cannot attend the town hall in person. So that's one example that's your A example for start with the basics. Jason, do you have a quick clarifying question?
I do, and I'm sorry, I don't want to mean to take up space, but I feel like I have to take up some space because this is a prime example. Let's say we do a town hall. How do we get community members that would not come to these events? I'm talking about those really like impoverished BIPOC people, houseless people. How do they come to events like this so they can hear how we are actually creating change in this community? That's what I would love to hear about, because the town hall is great and I love that stuff. But it's always the same people who show up, and it's not the people who I hear from on a consistent basis that are fearful about our carceral system here. You don't have to answer that. I just want to just put that out there to your point of like communicating the why, because I love that.
Thank you. Maya.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I love that. And it made me think, oh, we need a live feed at base camp where people can be assisted in making public comment, that kind of thing. I don't know. But that's tangent. Sorry, but I appreciate your
These are
thinking.
wonderful outreach strategies that are core to the racial equity issue that is being brought forward. So the what you're communicating, okay.
But how is it being communicated? And what other channels and avenues are we opening up to participate is absolutely key and core. And I'm not going to say it's a separate issue, but I am going to set it here for now because it is more of an outreach strategy piece that I think that you all need to just continue to have conversations about how can we be simple, but also innovative in how it is we're reaching out to people and bringing them into the conversation. Really.
Thank you. I'm still trying to figure out the computer here. So back to Jason and Maya's, having live feeds. I'd like to see it at all the public libraries, that there's an option for people to attend in Maple Falls, in areas that people don't want to travel back into town once they got home, that are distant, but that are still affected by what happens in the community. So yeah, it would be nice for us to be able to advertise for people that don't have the internet, that could go to a destination in their area to see what's happening.
Love that idea. Okay, B example. Next slide, please. So the B example is a little bit, we'll say a little bit meatier in what is being communicated and why. Example, you're having a groundbreaking event for a new 23-hour sobriety center or resource center that is being built in Whatcom County. I want residents to know how the new facility fits into the larger effort to transform criminal, legal, and behavioral health systems. And then what is the desired outcome? Raise awareness of sobriety center or resource center, and or some other core topic that you want to raise awareness of. Maybe you want folks to attend the event, and then learn more information from county or other online resource. And so I would say this is an example of an opportunity for broader communications than just we're having a groundbreaking for a thing. Come to our ribbon cutting ceremony. This is an opportunity to get into the what, the why, the who, and the how, to tell a bigger vision story that just so happens to timely coincide with this ceremony happening or this benchmark happening along the way within a project. So you're just going to start with asking and answering those basic questions before you start delving into putting sentences together. Next slide. Now the question becomes, and we've heard this many times, and understand that this was that this was something the IPRTF was struggling with in kind of trying to figure out how to develop communications, but all people struggle with it. We struggle with it as well. It's just a constant question, which is when you are talking about something, how much detail can you go into? Really, how far down can you delve? And the answer is messaging can go on forever. I think the rule for kind of fully developed, robust messaging on a new topic is about in 100 words. And so if you're going to develop, a new message on something, you may get to about that word count. And within that, you want context and you want accuracy. Jill?
Thank you, Sakara. Your audio, at least on my end, cut out right at that critical moment when you said the word count. What is that number again, please?
You're going to do right around 700 to 800 words.
700 to 800 words. Thank you.
Yeah. So the question, that we hear is how deep do we go? How far can we go with something before people aren't paying attention? People are really paying attention. They really want to understand. And I always say there's kind of a rule of three, which is, and what you're seeing on the slide, this is just an example of things that, may be related to each other, just for the purposes of this discussion. But let's say you're talking about a sobriety center or a resource center, and you want to give context to why that exists. And so as you're going through your kind of brainstorming early on message development session, think about the things that are most closely related to the sobriety center or the resource center that is important context that people may not have. Let's say that is one of those things is the Justice Project. People need to understand a little bit more about the Justice Project. So we're going to have to dedicate some paragraphs to breaking that down for people. And then you can go out a little bit further. Let's say as well, emergency room capacity data is something that is really significant or something that is really pushing this, or incarceration rates for public, whatever the three is, with that including your main topic that you want to talk about, you can give context. You can't give a whole volume, you can't give a whole chapter, but you can give really strong context, and you can go out of that initial core topic a little bit. You don't have to do 3, you can do 2, or you can just stick with your 1, but your audience wants to understand. And so it's okay to delve into other topics that tie right back into what it is that you are really trying to get them to focus in on and understand more about. Next slide. Once you have your final content, and this is for, something obviously bigger than just your typical task force meeting announcement. This is for, robust new messaging. Then you're going to add in your branding, your templates, and you're going to figure out on what channels you're going to be pushing this information out. And I erred on this slide because I neglected to point out that YouTube is also one of your channels. You have all of your meetings that are archived on YouTube. We have certainly pointed folks to meeting recaps consistently on social media through your YouTube page. But once you have your final content, messaging often has to be adjusted depending on where it is published and where it is promoted. So for example, an op-ed is published in full on a third-party website, but as we did with your other op-eds, this is an opportunity to still get the channels that you have control over involved in promoting that message. So on your web page, if you have an in the news section, or you feel like your op-ed is such a strong resource of factual information, you want to add it to your frequently asked question page for a specific topic. On social media, you have Facebook and Instagram. You can put up a post, quickly promoting and driving people to the op-ed, or if it's information on your website, information on your website. And then you have emails and listservs, email lists and listservs of partners, and then people in community that have signed up for various listservs through the Whatcom County website to get more information. So you have those means to continue to push information out beyond just a single channel. Next slide. So these next couple slides just have a few tips for, kind of few tips and highlights for these channels. Your web pages, I should say, because there are quite a few on Whatcom County's website. We did do some initial work with you all to develop out some pages. The fact page is one that immediately comes to mind, but it's it's something that can be updated and easily accessible information. It strengthens the platform as an important information access point for community. Web pages can serve as a long-term touch point and archive for important information, particularly dense information like reports and data. Web pages are also a great access point for information that originates from third-party websites. As I said, putting an op-ed or other kinds of important information, having a link within your web pages to promote that information. But then also it is important, and I think something that you all can be thinking about is what of the things that we do in digital can we replicate physically and make sure that community has access to these things? If people aren't on the internet, if they're not on our Facebook page, for example, if libraries becomes an important partnership and a resource for community to be able to attend meetings and town halls and things like that. Are there reports that you're making sure and information that you're making sure is printed and available in at libraries and other community touch points, food banks, shelters, etc.? What languages are you getting them translated in? Things like that. Next slide. Social media. Your social media, as you are kind of developing or adjusting your message for this channel, you kind of have two components. You have the graphics, helps get those with visual sight focused on it. And you have the caption, the words underneath, outside of the graphic. So your graphics should highlight an image, text, or data graph. Most social media platforms allow for multiple graphics, and this is great because you don't have to shove everything onto one graphic. That's when text starts to get smaller, things become illegible for folks to be able to easily read and absorb. So take as many graphic slides as you need to have clear, crisp, easy to read graphics. And then your caption, the words that are going with your social media post, you can get into much more detail. We wouldn't suggest something like copying over the entire contents of an op-ed into the caption. We would say give a good teaser or just directly point people to a link where they can access the op-ed or the report, etc. Next slide. And then email. Email is also an important avenue to reaching folks, particularly when, as is the case with the IPRTF, you don't email people all the time. So when they get an email, they pay attention to it. That's something that I would say is definitely a best practice. But within the email, you want to have it formatted in such a way that people are getting the information that they need upfront and right away, and that the purpose of the email is very, very clear. And so don't sleep on email. Don't think that, oh, wait, we did it on social media. It's fine. If you've got email lists and you've got information that you want to get out to people, use that resource and be, very simple with it. Start with the information you want the reader to know in 1 to 3 sentences, get to the heart of it. Within the first 5 to 7 sentences, provide the related links. And then if you have more information, put that below those pieces. So you cut right to the heart of it so that the audience knows, okay, this is what this email is about. Here's the link for me to access this information. And below that, if I have a couple more minutes before I need to run to my next meeting, I can read a little bit more background information. Next slide. Okay. We're going to pause there. We're going to take about 3 minutes. Any initial thoughts, questions from that section before we launch into a group exercise? Okay. I do not see any hands. So we are going to move to the next slide. So this is, again, just a group exercise. And Jill sent everyone an email beforehand. So you should have a link to, and maybe Emily, you actually flip to the Jamboard. So let's take a couple minutes to get oriented. Emily will flip to the Jamboard. I'll ask folks to check their email to make sure that they have an email from Jill that has all of the details about this meeting. And within there, you should have a link to a Jamboard. We'll share it on the screen shortly so you can see what it is. And we can see it starting to get populated, so it looks like folks have access to it.
All right, Jill here. I just want to let everyone know that I just now resent the Jamboard link, so it should be at the top of your email.
So you've got time to get into it. For those of you who are in the Jamboard, if you've never used a Jamboard before, it's very simple. You'll want to use the Jamboard on your screen. I know this is confusing. Emily is sharing it right now so people can see what it is, but you want to make sure that you have opened the Jamboard and that you have access to the Jamboard yourself. And to orient you to how to use the Jamboard, at the top where Emily's cursor is right now is how you move from page to page. So at the very top of your Jamboard, you can slide to go through each of the slides. There's just a few. And then on the left-hand side, there's a little sticky. I'm going to go down to the sticky. Yeah, right there. There's a sticky note. So those are the two things to orient folks. At the top, you've got the slider to move you to different pages. And on the left-hand side, you've got the sticky note. You don't need to change the color of the sticky note unless you want to. You don't need to put your name in unless you want to. But what we are going to do is, and we're going to have to be kind of quick here, is we are going to take about 5 minutes. Let's go ahead and go to the, second. Thank you. So a group exercise. The IPRTF is submitting an op-ed to a local publication in December. The goal is to recap the work and progress of 2023 and share some of the goals and priorities for 2024, including the new Sobriety Center or Resource Center, whichever terminology you prefer. And so what we are going to ask you to do within these next 10 minutes is we're going to ask you to go through, can you flip over one more? There we go. We're going to ask you to think about, just for yourself, again, you don't have to identify yourself on your stickies. Think about, what are the key messages for an end of the year op-ed? What did we do important? What did we accomplish this year that was important? What is important about the coming year? You know, what is the what? And then, so you're gonna just stick in stickies there. What do you think the key messages are? And if you don't know, that's okay. And then flip to the next slide, Emily. Stickies there for, what are some supporting messages to that? Why? Next slide. What's the proof? What are the background points to what you're thinking? And then next slide. Oh, that's it. I think there should have been an action slide as well. My apologies on that, but we've got enough here. So be thinking about an end of the year op-ed. What do you think are the key messages that need to be communicated about what was done this year, what is going to be done next year, and perhaps information or any messaging or vision about the 23-hour center? How does it fit? What link is that in this string of pearls that you all are putting together for Whatcom County? And just fill in as you see fit. And Emily, you can go ahead and take it down so that we don't confuse people. And we'll bring it back up in about 5 minutes. So folks, you should have your own Jamboards open and just be jotting in any notes and thoughts. Okay. Continue to contribute your notes. These are fantastic. Emily, are you seeing any trends?
Yeah, I was looking at this first slide, slide 3, messages speaking to the what, and I definitely see a couple of comments that to me feel like they're really about continuing to communicate with people about who the task force represents and works for and what the task force's role is, and clarifying that for community members. There are some a couple of key points about engagement, which really bring me back to your points, Jason, on how we're continuing to invite all members of our community into this work. So I see this point about inviting community into robust and thorough input gathering process, focus on BIPOC and other impacted groups, and also this point about broaden participation with stakeholder advisory committee on justice center and behavioral health facilities. So maybe talking about the ways in which the task force is engaging with and hearing from other entities and members of the community. Third, definitely see a theme around, kind of moving forward. Maybe the headline banner is the Justice Project Implementation Plan, but within that, we're talking about a successful jail tax that can be used as collaborative process, how we will provide transparency into the development of the new jail, and then see some points here about perhaps accomplishments, and how we are making progress beginning to fill gaps. So just as one example, if one of the priorities for what we're talking about is how the task force is hearing from, engaging with, communicating with others, then we see here in the why that, that is critical because the community, for example, has shown strong support for the implementation plan, and we need to follow through to continue to maintain trust. And perhaps a proof point of that would be letting people know specifically how their voices can be heard, and through what mechanisms, when and where. But this is great. There are a lot of ideas here.
So I will, let's see here. Share my screen a little bit. So when you are developing new messaging, this is kind of the process that you're going to start with. You're going to start with, we see these as well. Some of you have your post-its on this slide as well. We will make sure that these are captured. But you just kind of start with your brainstorming of what are the topics, what do we think is key, what is important, and then you for trends, what, as Emily pointed, what naturally kind of flows together in terms of topics and timeliness. But then also there's opportunity in here for other messaging that needs to be developed, right? There's a very clear appetite for digging into what is happening with public defense. And so that would be, I would say, develop separately. You don't want to try and mash too much up. And there's so much there that you've, talked about within this training that you've put on your post-its. That's a topic in and of itself that is ripe for maybe first or second quarter of 2024 to really delve into that topic and kind of launch a communications effort specifically on that to first of all build the message out so that you can get really clear and concise on what it is that you want to communicate, but then also develop it for the platforms that you're going to be putting it on, to get the information out to folks. So what we will do from this is we will take all of this from you all, and we will actually start to draft out your end of the year op-ed with much of this as our guiding point. And then we'll additionally put some notes together on some of the other topics and ideas that you brought up earlier in our discussion, about how those could be developed out in 2024 and beyond. But there is a lot here. This is really, really fantastic. So thank you everyone, for jumping into that Jamboard. Okay, we want to put the training deck back up.
And I
Are there
know,
any? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
oh, sorry, I was just gonna say, Sakara, I know we're coming up on time, and so I wonder if we want to overview some of the needs assessment and recommendations items and then close on Q&A, or spend our time on Q&A.
We can go for needs assessment and recommendations.
Recommendations and then Q&A. So, based on what we have learned through working with you all, we wanted to leave you all with some recommendations for the next steps of your work. We have just a few. The first is continue to grow your coalition, right? You only know what you know and you don't know what you don't know. And so it's really important to continue to reach out to people. And it sounds like this is prime time with the turnover and changes happening. Be thinking about what not just within government, but outside of government, to be growing your coalition, because in doing so, you expand your audience. Hopefully, in growing that coalition within and outside of government, you also start to share your communications resources, share social media posts and forward emails and things like that to, again, widen your audience. You know, there are, to Jason's point, you're going to need trusted messengers for some members of community who just aren't able to take that step at this point in time and trust and believe everything it is that you have to say on your will and your intention, because they're living with and suffering with the impact. And so just something to really think about and push for going forward. You've got a very strong start. You've got really important conversations and communications happening within government to get communications developed, and continue to do that work. Next slide. We saw tremendous growth and appetite on social media. We've just recently started an Instagram page, and we would urge you to continue to invest where you can in growing those audiences and letting folks know that you are there. Now, mind you, government agency, Facebook and social media pages, for municipalities of your size, they don't often have the biggest, greatest following, but the following that they do have is paying attention, wants to know about the information that they are sharing. And we know that about the IPRTF. So when and where you can, continue to let folks know where and how they can access you on social media and otherwise. Next slide. This last one, we have left you all with, and your staff has this, some suggested guidelines that I know are working their way through the process of policies and procedures for actually engaging with your audience. And I touched on this a bit at the steering committee meeting, which is to say that we know that people have different frames of references for this information. They're coming to it, from different places. They often have your communications. You do a really good job on accuracy and clarity of message, but clarifying questions inevitably come up. Miscommunications often happen. Misunderstandings often happen. And social media now is a dialogue. And so you've got people on your social media channels who are asking questions, but they might not be getting an answer right now because you don't have a policy or procedure for responding to them. And so we would recommend that you get that policy and procedure together in coming up with some sort of canned responses. Much of the questions that you get, rise to that level of just being able to point folks to more information or provide just 1 to 3 clarifying sentences on the question that they're asking. It's really that amplifies the kind of resource that your communications become. They aren't just one way. There's opportunity for a dialogue wherever there are communications. Emily, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, I think that's great. Thank you, Sakara. So with that, maybe we can see if there are any final questions.
Even.
Thanks to you both for this. This is really helpful. My question has to do with the Jamboard exercise, and I think I was hoping maybe, and probably unrealistically so, that our training could go a little bit farther. What I saw on the Jamboard was there were several threads of messaging that people felt strongly about: participation, seeking input, broadening that, explaining what the Crisis Relief Center was and where it fit in and why it was in the plan. So those are 2 different messaging threads, it seems to me. And if you put it up to the whole group cold, obviously we're going to get a lot of different off the top of our head thinking. My question is, what suggestions do you have for us to resolve those differences in real time? Because for myself, I don't yet want to invite participation when we haven't explained why we're focusing on the Crisis Relief Center, say. So we want that to be informed participation. But how you sequence those messages and how you honor both of those intentions within our task force is really what we're going to be wrestling with. And I'd like some guidance on how you think we could best do that.
Yeah, so first of all, I apologize that we did not have more time
For the Jamboard exercise, we intended to spend more time on it, but we had robust input and feedback earlier on that we felt was important to take our time with. So what I would say is that it should not be looked at, because you're absolutely right. This can happen where it's like, well, we think we should talk about this. Well, we think we should talk about this. And then you get at an impasse and it's like, well, if we can't even, it's both and then it's just sequencing to decide what are we going to develop first, and then what are we going to develop second. And some of the things that you will look at from your Jamboard, you'll realize logistically needs more development before you can put it out as a message, to your point, right? And so we're not going to do that right now, or it's not a priority. This is one package of messaging, and this is another package of messaging. And we're going to agree as a coalition that the sequencing for developing and publishing these things is going to be, again, whatever it is that you agree to as a group. But it doesn't have to be one over the other. It just has to be what's going to be developed together, and then the sequencing that makes sense. And so looking at the Jamboard, again, there are things just, kind of off the top of our heads that we can look at and go, yes, this is very timely, right? Because the tax just passed. So there are some things right there that are going to be really timely and kind of launching points for some of the other post-its, which are things that are going to be happening, that are going to be coming next year, right? And so we just you kind of look for, oh yeah, those things feel like they all flow together. Trust your gut. They feel like they go together, they go together. When they feel like they don't go together, develop them separately, right? And then maybe down the line, you are talking about those things together, but you recognize we can't just throw in, public defense and the prosecutors and this, that, and the other without really explaining to folks what's going on there. We need to do some development on that first, and not just kind of have it casually in a few sentences in an op-ed or in whatever the messaging is. Heather?
One question I have is who is going to actually be developing communications on behalf of the task force in the future, and who's going to be posting and engaging on the social media channels, and how will the task force and in what committees or form will we be able to stay engaged in that communications plan?
I think that might be a question for Jill.
Heather, thank you for that question. I think that probably will use the structure a little bit that we've been using with Sakara and Emily, in that we'll rely on the task force, you guys, to help us decide what those broader core messages are going to be. And the role of one of the roles of the steering committee has been to work with Pyramid. And I think that they can continue to take these broader messages the task force comes up with, and then start to fill in those post-its, if you will, and refine that messaging according to the best practices that Sakara and Emily have given us. And in terms of posting on the internet and carrying out those messages, that'll be myself and the council's new communications person, Jenna Grenand, who unfortunately is with us today, but we'll be carrying out what you guys come up with in terms of messaging.
Any other questions?
I can't remember what we said about this before, Sakara. Are you two still going to respond to our pleading emails if we have questions down the road?
Absolutely.
Good.
Yes, absolutely. And we will be
Good.
leaving your staff with a tremendous amount of information, virtually everything that has been developed, even some things that we developed and didn't publish. There are some, sometimes you do really, when we say don't reinvent the wheel, sometimes it's going back and looking at what have we already done. That gives you a good guide for going forward. But if there is a format that you need from us, or a reference document, or can you take a look at this? What do you think? Or we're stuck here. What do you think? I can speak for myself. I'm happy and honored, to weigh in wherever you all feel it is helpful, kind of as you get your wheels under you moving forward. Every communications challenge has a solution. And so, if you stumble or get stuck or hit a challenge, yes, please absolutely reach out. Absolutely.
I think I would just emphasize, you two came in with a lot of knowledge about this niche area. And then we fine-tuned that as we went, but we're really building this process on the fly. So I suspect that's where we'll need even more guidance, is the kinds of questions Heather raised and I raised. How do we actually go about getting these messages out? We'll probably need some help with that as we go down the road.
Barry.
Well, I just wanted to say what a pleasure it is to work with you all, and being close to the work like Stephen and I and Jack and Jill and now Jenna were. It was just so rewarding to watch you guys work and for us to be able to learn from you. And thank you so much for being here today and giving the task force the benefit of your, your experiences and your knowledge. It really is uplifting, and we need to just hold to a lot of the values that we talked about, and become good at getting those messages out and be effective. So thanks again, guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I for overtime, so thank you for the additional time. The final word that I would just want to leave you with is you all are doing
Some of the most important work be done in a community. You really are setting a precedent in the state of Washington for a new vision and a new way. And so be inspired by that and what is possible when you come together and when you reach out to community and they reach back. And I think the simplest answer of, well, who's going to do it? Who's going to it can be really, it can cause a lot of anxiety to be the person that says, okay, I'm going to take the first draft. I'm going to write this down, right? Because we put a lot of ourselves, whether we intend to or not, we're wrapped up in any effort. And then you put it in front of a group of people and they tear it apart. I don't like that sentence. I don't like this, that, or the other. So I would say that first, somebody is always going to have to volunteer as tribute to say, I'm going to take I've taken everybody's notes and I'm going to take the first crack at drafting this. And then it's just an offering. It is a launching point for how do we make this the best message possible. Person that volunteers as tribute, whether it is a staff person who's paid for it or whether it is a volunteer on committee, don't take it personally when people say, oh, I don't think we should say that. Well, I don't think that you are doing some of the most important work, taking the most important step to say, okay, I'm going to take all of this and I'm going to try and put it together in some sentences so that we can all come to it, figure out what we like, what we don't like, and what we need to change going forward. That's how it goes from stickies to a document. And you have such commitment amongst you, such heart for the work, and such commitment to getting it right, that I truly believe that whether you stumble or hit challenges, as you absolutely will, because everybody does, that you will continue to be successful in your communications, and you will continue to innovate in the hows and the wheres of communications to reach more people in your community that are impacted by these issues. So congratulations on the work so far, and nothing but success onward.
Well, I will echo Barry in saying we so much appreciate the work you've done with us and for us, the professionalism, the rigor, and the heart that you've brought to what we're so engaged in. Hard to believe we're sort of near the end of the road on this, but we're well along on the path. So thanks to both you, Emily, and you, Sakara, for what you've provided today and what you've helped us develop over the last year and a half or so. So happy trails.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been an honor working with you all. We appreciate the opportunity very much.
Okay, moving on in the agenda. We're at other business. Is there any other business? I see none. Then Jill, I guess we're at public, or I'm sorry, Heather, go ahead.
I just would like to, I guess, Stephen, maybe you could give me guidance on where would be the best place to have a conversation as a task force about what does transforming the criminal, legal, and behavioral health system actually mean to each of us and our role in that, and like actually detail that vision out a little more.
Well, I'll just give one personal thought to that, Heather, and then an idea. That was a tagline, and so I think we need to distinguish between a tagline that is a very succinct summary of an ethos versus really detailing something out in detail. So that's like you're asking almost a strategic planning question, I think. And so I would think of it in those terms rather than what that particular set of 6 words means to us.
That's fair. I feel like our communication needs to match our work and our alignment. And so if that's the tagline we're messaging, then how do we live up to that?
Right, right. And I think our process up to this point is we sort of take up and try to shape something to put forward on a subject through the steering committee. So I think that would be where I would start with that and see if other ideas or alternative pathways are proposed for that. Raylene and then Mike.
Stephen, just a thought on that. I mean, it could be a question that's brought up at each subcommittee. And then from those subcommittees, we could bring that back to the steering committee and then decide how we would want to present it to the task force as a whole, because I think each subcommittee has different ideas on how we can transform legal injustice and behavioral health, and then how we can bring that together as a group. So just a thought.
Thank you. Mike.
This is actually kind of aligned with what Heather was talking about, and I've been sitting and with Heather's comments and some of Jason's comments, and really thinking about the new facet really for the task force, which is less about inward and focusing on maybe work or specific initiatives we can reduce incarceration, which I think can be transformational, but not in and of itself does it transform a system. And we're going to need to have more conversations about this. We're going to need to develop, I think, some structures around communication. And I think in steering with that group, it worked really well to work in that small kind of workshop fashion. But I think what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling personally, because I get to go to those steering committee meetings, is how do we broaden that conversation? And how do we also develop a communication strategy and then reflect on, are we living up to that? So I think it's going to be some new work for the task force, if I could be more concise, and especially one that looks at communication in its reciprocal two-way form. And that is one thing that this is very new for the task force. We've pretty much done inward work and then just kind of shared what we did. Well, we've been inviting people in more, and I think we need to continue with that, do better with that even, and develop some capacity within the task force to do so in an honorable way.
I think that's a very constructive observation, Mike. Thank you. And I'll just add to that because of the outcome of Proposition 4, we have really drastically expanded what our work is. There's going to be a highway for the JPOP and the oversight of the implementation plan that we have responsibility for. And then there's this opening and two-way street for communication. Those are not completely separate, but they do have distinct emphases and maybe distinct skill sets that some of us will gravitate to one or the other. But both of those things, which is more than we've done before, are going to be on our plate in 2024 and for several years beyond. So we're going to need to ramp up our game, and we're going to need to ramp up our capacity to play that game. Arlene. You're muted, Arlene.
Yeah, the reason that I said what I said before about using jargon is because of the point that Jason McGill is making, which is that we have to be understandable to people without an education, without the ability to use three-syllable words. And we do it as a matter of course. So you have to go over every sentence and maybe there's no budget for communication, so we have to add it to our labors and do it ourselves, right? So they aimed the communication at us today. And maybe the steering committee should go over all the communications before they go out.
Point well taken. I appreciate you reemphasizing that, Arlene. Thank you. Any other comments from any of us? Okay, Jill, I'll go back to you to invite public comment.
Thank you, Stephen. We do have 2 attendees with us today who have their hands raised. Andy Douglas, go ahead and speak to the task force.
Hi, this is Andy Douglas, and I thank you for the work that you've been doing. I would like to say that I live in Cordata, and I have doorbelled throughout here, especially in the low-income housing areas, and I have doorbelled in many low-income housing developments and mobile home parks in the county. I think you need to take a traveling circus kind of town hall to these low-income communities. I think I have, while I have a bachelor's in nursing and a master's in psych, I have many family members who have learning disabilities, and if you mention books, their mind closes, and so they wouldn't think of going to libraries. But if you want to find the people that are participating in mental health and who have been through the judicial system, you need to have meetings in the low-income housing, either the official low-income housing or the mobile home parks and low-cost apartments, not really low cost, but low cost for here. They have really, talking to them has really changed my thinking about what is needed and what needs to be communicated. And as well, you really need to tap into the gossip mill. The gossip mill is actually a little bit stronger than Facebook. And the people that work in those housing areas and the offices, and there's always offices in those places, and oftentimes big enough to have a meeting, they know who the communicators are in those housing developments or housing establishments, and they can get the word out probably even faster than Facebook. So I encourage you to think a little bit more primitive than you have been thinking. I think you have a great intellectual approach, and that's my home base is also intellectual. I find that it really doesn't work in those areas. And so change your thinking a little bit and start seeing the people who have just gotten out of prison and where they might be. And my husband wants to make a comment too. He's Jamie Douglas.
Hi, thank you again for all the work that you're doing on this. With the election that just happened, we have new sheriff and funding now, a council established here that's going to be addressing. I know a lot of people that have voted for the public safety measure that are apprehensive in making that vote. They are very afraid that the conversation will turn away from behavioral health and rehab into a large capacity jail construction. And I think that retaining trust, alleviating their fears by talking about the actions that are being taken, and that behavioral health is actually a priority. Some of the people who just got elected, for example, Ben Ellenboss has actually publicly said, well, we really need to build a jail and then we'll get around to building the other facilities. This scares, I think, a lot of people. So factor that in I hope with your messaging, and I hope that you can push for behavioral health and use of funds there to be a priority. My personal vote would be, hey, let's do that first, and then we can build more trust and really tackle a problem to reduce how big a jail we have to really have. Thank you again for your work.
Thank you
Thank
both.
you, Andy, and thank you, Jamie, both for your perspectives. Sorry, Joe.
Yes, Jason, if you want to go ahead and speak to the task force.
Hi, good afternoon, folks. Jason DeForest here, local business owner. I just again want to speak to police accountability and healthcare worker accountability. These are folks that have the original interaction with anybody that is arrested or is having an emergency situation. They really decide and dictate how that situation unfolds. So we need to see what they're doing, hold them accountable for what they're doing if they're choosing to do it the wrong way, and make sure that all of those practices are being done correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. Those are all the hands
okay.
that are raised. Barry Buchanan, if you have a minute after the meeting, I've just got a quick question for you. Thank you.
Will do.
Thank you, Jill. And thank you, everyone, for participating in the training and for sharing comments throughout the session today. At this point, we're adjourned. See you in December.